So as I continue with this series, I want to sort of name an elephant in the room or draw some attention to this issue with it's this ancient lost science of consciousness that is the most precious of knowledge, and that is why we see sacred geometries, the geometries of how consciousness magnetized form into the form of this body so that it could have this experience, and why that's important, and how this mind does shape reality. And it's two steps, it's 2 feet. It's not that, this mind just like created the whole universe. We're only seeing the one side. The way consciousness emanates out and reaches out into the world, it has to work with its laws. It comes to perception. That's, there's a half right, half wrong when people talk about, our consciousness creates the universe around us. It does, though. It does, because it motivates our actions. It affects it chemically. It affects it electromagnetically, biologically, and in all sorts of vibratory, geometric ways. Yes, thought is doing things to our environment around us. We see this in Masaru Emoto's study on water. It's geometrically shaping things. And if we study these things, geometry, out here in nature, if you study the geometries, there's a great book by a mathematician called Michael S. Schneider. He's deeply insightful and educated on topics of Egyptian shamanism, ancient wisdom, Hinduism, Buddhism, Eastern philosophies, meditation, all this kind of stuff, and especially ancient wisdom, ancient cultures, ancient societies, and the things that they knew, the things that they recognized, things that they taught their children. And it's in a leaf. We know all of these plants around me, every plant there ever is, and us in the womb, there is an electrical charge, an invisible electrical vortex of energy being, just in the way that we exhale, or that we're radiating eminent heat from our bodies. That's charging the space around us. When something's growing, it does the same thing, but it's putting it out in a geometric pattern, and then it grows along the lines of those geometries. So when you're talking about sacred geometry and you're seeing how, all leaves, even if they're a different shape, they grow in a pentagonal, all life is pentagonal, pentagrammal, five-pointed, the pentad. Pentad geometry, very often it incorporates the entire arcana, or uh, corpus of knowledge of the primal numbers, 1 through 10. Because 1, 2, and 3 can't exist. If you're into physics, I don't want to get too deep into this. 1 and 2 can't exist in a three-dimensional plane, because a point, what it's represented as, a oneness, doesn't exist. A oneness doesn't exist in all reality. Reality is the oneness. It's very deeply philosophical. You kind of have to be familiarized with these concepts first before getting deep into this. A line, which is 2, represented by 2 points in the line between, that's dimensionless. You can't see the line because it has no depth. So 3 is where the triangle is born. That we use a triangle to geolocate everything, to spatially locate anything, two-dimensionally or three-dimensionally, in any space or environment, requires 3 points of reference. These are the 3 dimensions of reality, which is actually 4 dimensions, because everything is transient, impermanent, changing, morphing, moving. It's an energy vortex of form here in a time linear uh, experience of reality. That's what we're talking about. And for this reason, Pythagoras said there were only 7 numbers. There is no 1 and 2. Those are just the mother and father of number, the mater and pater, the matter and pattern. Those words come from those meanings, are words for mother and father, because the ancients related those to each other in their deep science of consciousness, how things actually work.
Yeah, so to give a little more clarity around this aspect of mater and pater, mother and father, and where that really comes from, is to this ancient forgotten science of brilliance of these ancient cultures. they somehow knew that, mater, mother, was, you know, creating the matter, the material form for consciousness to precipitate into. This can be inferred, sort of intuitively. But the other part, the insemination from father, instilling pattern, giving the pattern, the encoded patterns in, the seminal fluid, that one semen containing, in this wrapped up fractal, holding all of the geometries that are needed for the mother's womb to naturally, start materializing matter, materializing the form for the consciousness to manifest on. So these two aspects of creation, well known to the ancients, and shows up in our language today because they invented our language. We inherited their science and are still trying to understand it truly, reverse engineer it, and we're not there yet.
And that's why these things were important. So without 1 and 2, we have 7. And 7 is the number of colors in a rainbow. 7 is the unfilled octave or the full octave before I am 1 again. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. Do, octave, 8. Fullness, 7. 1 and 2 can't exist in a 3-dimensional realm. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. 10 is just 1 again. It's 1 with a 0. And the deep wisdom of why the Indians, it comes from India. They had those numbers. Western culture, European culture inherited or digested those numbers because of the value of not having some weird written pattern, the Roman numerals to do their mathematics. In the same way that the wise use of a 1 through 10 scale of number, and the Egyptians took this a step further and were binary, and we can't get into that right now, but 1 through 10 makes mathematics possible to do, so much easier to understand. In the same way, all ancient cultures, we still see it in Japan and China with their written form, their writing form, which, yes, there's a lot more characters than an alphabetic or a phonetic written language, but what we do with a phonetic written language, and the parallel is right in front of us. The ancients left the parallel for us to comprehend this right in front of us, where the Egyptian Book of the Dead is written on 4 walls in many tombs across Egypt. The Book of the Dead is bigger than the Bible. It's like so people are translating what concepts are shown on 4 walls in hieroglyphs. And to do that with a written language, it takes an entire book. With what you can accomplish imparting the concepts, think about the way I'm trying to impart concepts and thoughts and ideas, frames of reference to you in this video by speaking to you, being able to do that just by standing in a room and just looking at the pictorial images, the hieroglyphic relationships between symbols. Symbols are very powerful. You take time and you pack symbolic symbolism into symbols. And the Egyptians were masters of symbols because they were layering several meanings into one symbol so that it could speak to the subconscious, the artistic. You digest an entire book by sitting in one room looking at the walls, and you're contemplating death, because this is in a sarcophagus, a tomb. This is in a tomb where you're thinking about, the end of your existence and the function of all these things, and they're describing the science of things. You can imagine that it's going to be, it's going to raise more powerful emotions than, the Tuesday night matinee movie of, whatever rom-com you're watching. This is why they didn't have TV and cell phones. They didn't need it. Their experience of their lives through understanding. When they looked at a plant, they saw so much more. Their mind was just rolling through like geometry and consciousness and the awareness and how it's aware. And yes, science does a lot to help us to see what's going on, but science comes from the inquisitive mind. And science can only take you so far, because then you have to come into the self-awareness, the science of your consciousness, which is all about feeling, which is all about emotion, which is all about transience and impermanence and the flow of life and awareness. What is awareness? Awareness is here. Awareness is in everything. I mean, look around the planet. It's covered in green in most places. Life is just popping out of everything, and we're not concerned about consciousness. We're like, a consciousness came out of it. Okay, well then how and why? Because if you look at the anatomy of how blood vessels route through little holes in your skull and route to your brain, and the function of your anatomy, this is the most ingenious machine ever built, far beyond our own knowledge to do. So what intelligence created it? And yes, God, and you can say that God is an interpretation of God is a consciousness, right? And any lineage that talks about a God is going to say, I drew you from my breast. I am in you, whether it's Krishna or our Lord Jesus Christ or, Horakti, Amun Ra. All these are concepts to speak of the same thing. That's why deeper into antiquity, farther before the Holy Roman Catholic Church, beginning level, right when Christianity started, everything that Jesus says, every quote, every word from his mouth is speaking directly to this exact same philosophy. The kingdom of heaven is within you. The kingdom of heaven is in your mind, is in your perceptions, the way you perceive of things. There's a lot here, and it takes a lot. It takes a revisiting the concepts and a digesting of them. That's why the Egyptians and all ancient cultures, we're talking about the Aztecs and the Mayans, they had hieroglyphic writing. They're packing knowledge into you so that you have to get all these moving parts working at the same time before the insight of the coherent picture, boom, hits you, and that's enlightenment. It takes the optimization of all of these faculties. So we're going to take that, and now I want to talk about alchemy, and because this is a beautiful way of framing, and it's a very scientific way of framing what we're after with enlightenment, with insight, with awakening, what is going on, how it's going on, and what you need to do to get there. We're doing a lot of talking, which is kind of sad because I want to get to instruction on we have to pack in the concept first, and then we have to come to, okay, how do you actually do it? It's here. It's just, it's forgotten, and it's not easy to conceive of. It sounds too basic because we don't have that body of knowledge that we're driving all of that implication down into the instructions that are given to us through yogic disciplines, through ancient Vedic teachings, through activating the cities, but I think most importantly through Buddhist teachings of mindfulness and meditation. And what this is, mindfulness needs to be brought into this understanding that, mindfulness is not a modern invention by psychiatrists. Mindfulness isn't even an invention of the Buddha. Meditative practices were developed far beyond any pre-Diluvian ancient flood that destroyed whatever was here. And whether you want to go for that or not, ancient cultures had this fully, completely developed at the very dawn of time, and that is unquestionable. You cannot argue with that. It is carved into stone, granite. I am a wood carver. I am a carpenter. This is insane. And we don't have to get into that. We just have to know and acknowledge that their science of this was completely developed at the dawn of time. Mindfulness comes from before the Buddha. But the cultures from which the Buddha was a part, India, Vedic religions, neighbors to great Egypt, and these were trading cultures, and then we're just like, oh yeah, we know that the Egyptians traded, but there's no way that they walked 2 miles down the road and we're like, hi India, you want to trade knowledge and wisdom? And their gods are the same. Of course they did. Of course they did. It's kind of obvious. The paradigm of the modern world will vehemently resist this and deny it because it changes the whole game. And there's lots of people that don't want that for a myriad of different reasons. Some is just fear-based, some is power, greed, some is like control, some is fear. A lot of it is fear. If the world gets completely destabilized, where does the power go? And what if it falls into bad hands? We don't know. We can't know what everyone's thinking all the time, but we can acknowledge the delicacy of this situation, the volatility of it. So these teachings of mindfulness and how to apply them brought me to the topic of alchemy. Alchemy is really great symbolically for helping us understand what is too esoterically spoken about in Vedanta, in Hinduism, in Buddhism, in yoga, especially Egypt. We can't even comprehend what Egypt is. And it's just the whole story of Egypt is swamped in misinterpretation, and they were so on such a different wavelength that understanding them is extremely difficult. But we can use the scale of different people. We can recognize and trust in what these people were saying that is the same. And if you want to spend the next 20 years doing that and doing it in a scientific way where you never allow yourself to presume that you know or make assumptions, keep all of the questions open the whole time and get through 20 years of it, I think you, like me and many others, will realize, no, man, these people are talking about the same thing. There's a great tale that comes from the traditional suttas of the Pali Canon, so Buddha's teachings that the Buddha is said to have said himself. He said, bhikkhus, this is a word for monks. Bhikkhus, if you bring blind people in to see an elephant, this is also shown in a TV show recently, and all of those blind people, are allowed to touch an elephant, but they only touch one part. They'll all give a very different description of that. An elephant is like a big hose. An elephant is like a thin, rough piece of paper, or like a sheet of leather. An elephant is like a column touching the leg, touching the ear, touching the trunk. These are all different perceptions and of a blind mind. The unenlightened mind to the root of mind, consciousness, is blind. We're blind. So each of these cultures presents a different view. And if you can broaden your perceptions enough to recognize these people are talking about morality, they're talking about harmony, they're talking about the origin of consciousness, they're talking about the veil beyond duality, and we can say night and day and black and white and good and evil and all of that stuff, but that doesn't mean anything until we make it emotional. What are the dualities of emotion? Craving and hatred. These are what's talked about in Buddhism, and this is where I implore everyone on earth to aim this insight, is your cravings, your desires, being mindful of them, noticing your hatreds, not solidifying the analytical mind in, yes, I do hate this person. Notice the conditions for hatred to have arisen, and then loosen the paradigm to contemplate why and how the conditions for why this hatred came, for why this craving came, because that's duality operating on the anatomical, neurological, neurochemical, biological level, which is affecting your consciousness through your limbic system. So that's where, when, and how, and why it matters. Duality. Duality out here doesn't matter. It's a reflection of what's in here. But if we're going to get down to brass tacks, and if we're going to get to business with this work, if we're going to gain any of the insights that the ancients gained, we're going to have to deal with our feelings. And that's what these things are about. But the beautiful thing about dealing with your feelings is that when you loosen your craving and you soften your hatred, and these are extremes, which can be brought down to away from each extreme wall to liking and disliking. Just soften, and this is where bias comes from. And bias, taken to extremes, becomes prejudice, becomes racist, becomes war, becomes killing, becomes Soka pari dewa dukkha domanasam. Soka pari dewa dukkha domanasu payasa. Sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair in the Pali language. All the darkness, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair, all of these things on the scale, and we could think of it as the alchemical scale of acidic and basic, coming to water. This is why water is such an incredible symbol on so many different levels. We're trying to be water. The Noble Eightfold Path of the Buddha is a moral path. It is the path of the middle way, not because right is right and wrong is wrong, but because you want to just stabilize right in the middle so that you can see things clearly. Getting hooked into one edge of duality or the other, we want to walk a razor line, and this is where these teachings of tranquility come into focus. Now we have to talk about Kundalini and the golden flower, and this primordial science of awakening, of enlightenment, of rapture, of what the saints experienced, what the Egyptians experienced, what the Buddhist monks experienced, what many still experience today, what there isn't a language for to describe and never has been, which is why it gets brushed off as esotericism or fanaticalism or fancies of grandeur and imagination,
Flights of fancy and delusions of grandeur.
because we have a paradigm that filters that it's a sieve for shooting this stuff off there, and someone designed that sieve, as Carl Sagan warns us in an old interview of his.
One is what I just talked about, that we've arranged a society based on science and technology in which nobody understands anything about science and technology, and this combustible mixture of ignorance and power, sooner or later, is going to blow up in our faces. I mean, who is running the science and technology in a democracy if the people don't know anything about it? And the second reason that I'm worried about this is that science is more than a body of knowledge. It's a way of thinking, a way of skeptically interrogating the universe with a fine understanding of human fallibility. If we are not able to ask skeptical questions, to interrogate those who tell us that something is true, to be skeptical of those in authority, then we're up for grabs for the next charlatan, political or religious, who comes ambling along. It's a thing that Jefferson laid great stress on. It wasn't enough, he said, to enshrine some rights in a constitution or a Bill of Rights. The people had to be educated, and they had to practice their skepticism and their education. Otherwise, we don't run the government. The government runs us.
You're not a scientist. You don't understand what it is, but somebody does, and they have told you what it is, but they didn't. The scientist didn't. The scientist just works as a scientist. Scientist offers up their knowledge because that's in human nature to do. It's the people who are dictating the there's a term for that, and I forget the word. The story, and you have to know that story for yourself. Kundalini, awakening, alchemy. What is going on? The deeper you dig into these ancient teachings, the more you're going to understand these people were aware of brain anatomy. They were aware of the limbic system. They knew every part, piece, and function of it. But they knew it on an emotional level too. They depicted it in their most esoteric and symbolic of art, images of the brain stem as goddesses, as gods, as structures. This is them saying, we know it, we know what's in here, we know how it all works. But seeing pictures of it and seeing art of it isn't the same as the actual instruction for what is going on. We do know in our modern science what's going on. Chemicals are being released flowing through and affecting us. They are what physiologically causes our emotion, which causes sensation down the spinal column, in our nerves, through our cerebrospinal fluid. There are chemicals for anger, chemicals for sadness and joy, and all these things. So in every lineage, they speak of this stabilization, this balance of chemicals. Literally in alchemy, they took it all the way to focusing on that as the symbolic. It's part symbolic and it's part like physical, actual scientific truth, is that in the Buddha's, Eightfold Noble Path is this way of living our lives so that our inner chemistry is never unbalanced. We're literally developing a chemical elixir inside of the limbic system. It's DMT. It's DMT being released from the pineal gland. But you cannot just go out and get some DMT and just make it dump your brain with drugs. You can do that, and it's gonna blow your socks off. It's gonna be amazing. It's gonna teach you a lot of things. But what we want to do is to coax that thing, to inside that limbic brain where your pineal gland is. You have your pituitary sitting down in this awesome little armored shrine of your skull. It's like the only part of your brain that has its own skull. It's like inside of your skull, and it's just hanging off your brain like testicles, like very strange and completely encapsulated, because it is the activating gland for all your other glands. It's a very important part of our hardware. And then, the brain on the backside of it is your pineal. So we want to take that and we want to pet it and we want to brush it, just like Puss in Boots in the fourth Shrek, who's a pretty kitty, I am.
Now who's a pretty kitty? I am.
We want to do that to ourselves. We want to soothe ourselves. We want to never be afraid of death, of war, of the end of our lives, of losing our loved ones, of being cheated on or betrayed or losing our job. And they know that, which is why you have a job, which is why you get married, which is why there's all these complications in our lives, and we're cranked on with our emotions in this culture. And this is why, because if you're going to stabilize these things and soothe the pineal gland to the point where it naturally releases the DMT inside of it, it's going to be a completely different experience than some psychedelic, like, dude, I was like tripping, man. You're not hallucinating. When you can coax this in, and you can on week-long or 10-day-long meditation retreats. I have done it, and I have had some profound experiences, and I was not hallucinating, not really. My visual cortex was definitely lit up, and my visceral experience was totally intense. The Buddha gives very explicit instructions about these things to let go of the pleasure. As the pleasure's rising, as more and more endorphins are being released in the limbic system, when you, vinaya lokaya bija dhammanasam, let go of worldly covetousness and grief, this is our duality, when you let go of both of these systematically and consistently, joy naturally arises. Pleasure naturally just starts. There's nothing wrong, so the brain just starts to light up. And then there's inspiration. These are the 7 factors of enlightenment, the sattva-bojjhangas, which start with mindfulness as the oversight. And then there's 3 that parallel each other going on. These factors, ways of experience. One of them is investigation, which causes inspiration. Playing with our faculties of awareness, this natural investigation into things, which the body raises energy because you're in active mode. You're inactive but in subconscious mode because you are subdued. We're in a non-reactive state. That's a subconscious state. We're polarizing between the 2 hemispheres of our brain, conscious to subconscious, by not having feelings. Yes, we're becoming the Borg, we're becoming robots, and we're going to end up killing everybody, and especially the Christians, because we're evil. No, we're not talking about not ever feeling ever again. We're talking about having a tolerance for feeling and staying noble and dignified before God, you might say, sort of speak. We're talking about a holistic earnestness, a grace with our human experience, and a maturity to have these feelings and not act upon them, to let them pass through our perceptions and not be riled. I think that any God would be very proud of us if we were able to actually metabolize the experience that he gave us here on this world, which is what these teachings are trying to influence us to do, is to metabolize this experience, to be with our experience without vinaya loke abhija domanasam, going into covetousness or going into grief, lamenting what's going on or delighting in it. Buddha speaks, there's an entire sutta where all the suttas, at the end of them, the monks, they delight in what he's taught them. They relish it. They relish the wisdom of it. But then the Buddha gives a talk about relishing and delighting in things. And he says, monks, when you delight in something, it kills everything. It kills that plant you're trying to grow inside yourself. It destroys the inner chemistry of your limbic system. It screws everything up. The minute you delight in something, there's craving, there's wanting. There's craving and wanting. There's something that can be lost. And hatred is born because you will defend that thing that you now love. So don't delight. And at the end of that sutta, it says, and the monks did not delight in what the Buddha said that day. And it's the only one in the whole canon, and the rest, almost all of them, it ends very much like that. They end similarly because it was not written down for hundreds, if not 1,000 years, at least 300 to 500 years, maybe 800, I'm not sure. It was memorized from it was an oral tradition from teacher to student. And if you've ever been to a Buddhist monastery, you sit there chanting, you chant in Pali and you chant in English to get this stuff into your memory, and it works. All the ancient cultures did this, and it works. So the elixir of the gods, what is it called? It's called Amrita. In Hinduism, this golden elixir that the gods are all trying to get through polarity, through this polling of polarity, this is the symbol. And the post is your spinal column, your brain stem, that column and the two serpents of good and evil. It's liking and disliking. This is the chemical work that we're doing inside this. And later in the series, we'll show all of the different diagrams and symbolic representations of this so that it can become very clear that there cannot be anything else that these people were talking about. And for some reason, the symbols are almost exactly the same and shown in on all continents of the earth. Once you go back to pre-Diluvian times, they all had the same thing, just like we all have the same iPhones, in poor villages in Africa and, here in Colorado in the United States and in Europe and all the way up to Canada, you'll see the same cell phone. This is why they didn't have cell phones. They had temples because they had happiness, they had joy. The elevation, the evolution of human consciousness comes with the sorrowful lament of releasing your attachment to the physical world. And yes, that means the beer and the hot women or those meaty men or, and whatever. This is why, there's such a separation now between people, people saying, oh, gender is right, or is it wrong, or is it okay, or it's just, you don't belong to one. Your consciousness doesn't belong to a gender, and your consciousness has both. And that's what all ancient cultures taught, is that both genders are in all things. There's cells of yours that are giving birth to other cells right now. The feminine principle is in you. If you relate more with one than the other, and you find yourself attracted to the same sex or a different sex or a quantum sex or a bipolitical multi-dimensional sex, dive in, experience it. But my message to you is, don't dive in and experience any of it. Because if you want to evolve your consciousness, it's okay. It's okay to enjoy your life. But not to the point that it has control over you, and it does have control over all of us in this culture, in this world paradigm, and it is killing us because we're all addicted to something. And just because we're hiding the fact that we're addicted to our coffee or our pornography or watching football or gambling on football or it's our own religion, you know, that justifies our bad behavior, whatever it is, we all have addictions. Everything that lives is addicted, and the Buddha talks about this. And there are some addictions that are part of our consciousness's connection with the physical world, and those are drinking water and eating food and sleeping. We have developed an emotional attachment to these things, and the Buddha gives instructions to how to break your addiction to food while continuing to take food. That is the end of the line. When you can do that, you have full control over your limbic system. So if you want to understand the lengths you have to go to achieve the elixir of immortality, to achieve full Kundalini awakening, to achieve this absolute harmony in the limbic system, you have to be able to inject heroin and not be addicted to heroin. Because when you don't sleep a lot, you wake up early and you go to bed late, you meditate all the time, you don't drink coffee, you don't drink alcohol, you don't take drugs, you don't masturbate, and you don't have sex, because this is how monastics have lived their entire life. I'm married, I dabble in these things, but I give a lot of effort to not leaning all the way into them. And when I do, I try to bring mindfulness and awareness to it, not to not eat the cake, but to not delight in it, to notice that activation in my nervous system of pleasure. I'm really gonna enjoy this. You have just blasted your internal chemistry all to pieces.
Wow. Let's do that again. No!
You have lost your equilibrium. For you to evolve like a caterpillar transforms into a butterfly, you have to be done with this physical world. You have to get to a point where none of it gets you off anymore. Makes sense, right? But we don't see the dire consequences of living lives that aren't, graceful, noble. There's a nobility to a spiritual awakening, to an ascendance of your consciousness, to becoming a mental archon that sees things as they are, that sees what's happening inside of itself, inside of its own emotional structures. This is mindfulness. This is meditation. This is samadhi. This is this trance concentration where you see your thoughts arise. You see where they started, when they started, the conditions for them to arise, how and why, and the emotions that come with them, and you're still in control. That's Bushido code. That's samurai training. That's spiritual awakening. That is the priest caste. That is what monks are doing. And not for no good reason. There's a lot that are doing it for no good reason, because they were homeless and they wanted a free meal, because they want to, their ego structure wants, to be this religious, somebody. But the people who are doing it for the right reasons, who do it the longest, who actually are homeless their entire lives, because they don't give a hoot about anything this world has. It's a physical, external world. When your senses make contact with the external world, it causes feeling inside you. You're in control of those feelings all the time, but you give your power away to circumstance out here. And that is not enlightened, it is not wise, it is not divine, it is not noble. And let's face it, it is straight it's foolish. We're giving our pleasure away. But we haven't been taught. We've lost this ancient science. We've lost this ancient awareness of ourselves. So we've come to the crux, and we've already taken so much time to build this framework so that we can understand these concepts. As we go forward in these lessons, in these teachings, in these desanas, is just a talk. It's a talk on more awakened topics, in ancient Pali. It's called a desana, which I like to just call them those because I don't see myself as teacher. I don't see these as lessons. It's a sharing. It's yeah, it's something deeper. So where I want to go with these lessons is talking about the alchemy, the actual intelligent design of how to fulfill these things. And while these things are shared across cultures in many cultures, because in my perspective, there's evidence that the Buddha was enlightened. He achieved it. He did it. What Jesus was talking about doing, what uh, 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 Hermes is talking about, what Thoth is talking about, what Amun-Ra is talking about, what Pythagoras was talking about, what all the saints are talking about, what Krishna was talking about. The Buddha fulfilled that. I believe Jesus also fulfilled that. The Buddha's teachings are very clear, and he, from the very beginning, stays very focused. He's like, I'm not going to teach you all this stuff. This is what you need to know. And it is suffering and the end of suffering. And this is a dualistic, polarized philosophical statement. These are the Four Noble Truths. This is his first teaching, suffering and the end of suffering. Well, if the end of suffering is, and the complete opposite of suffering is, it's not suffering, it's quantum bliss that lasts for eternity, right? Because suffering is impermanent. The opposite of it is lasting. And he says this. It's the only thing that he does say is permanent, is nibbana, the infinite, the unconditioned, everlasting freedom from suffering. And that is all he teaches. And he says that. He says, I teach one thing and one thing only, suffering and the end of suffering. And a big part of his enlightened, awakened consciousness is saying that because he knows anyone smart enough to understand what I'm saying, to actually be thinking about what I'm saying, is going to know that what I really mean is I'm going to teach you the very core root of all things. And then I won't have to teach you all things, because once you get this, and that's exactly what the ancients taught, once you understand this piece, everything else starts to fall into line, and in ways that you can't put language to, because it is esoteric, it's symbolic, it defies all description, which is why he tries not to. And many times in the suttas he does. He avoids all description. He doesn't give descriptions of things. You can't say only this is true, this is how things are. We can't stabilize an atom, a particle, a cell, anything in the natural world, because everything is in this flux. Everything is moving through time, and in time energy forces are flowing. Nothing can be outlined and described perfectly. So the evolution of consciousness leads beyond language, because language will fail. Language is linear, it's solid, it's stuck. Or we can say, in the words of the late Alan Watts, language is scrawny. It's unmoving, trying to describe things that are moving. So that's what we'll be doing. I'm going to end this with just some simple instruction. Your beginner's starting guided meditation, using the principles of initiating the achievement of this inner balance that is the very center of all these ancient teachings. So wherever you are, wherever you find yourself, I'd ask you to pause the video and get yourself prepared to just be with yourself. If you're not in a good time to do that now, pause the video, wait. Come into some presence where you are, with yourself, with any excitement, with any feelings, whatever the emotions are. Take a deep breath, breathe all those emotions in, and soften them and release them on an out breath. Just be as viscerally, calmly here with yourself, in your experience, whether you're angry, whether you're excited, whether you're sad, whether you're know what is happening. and be vulnerably, fully present with it. Allow whatever's happening to be happening inside you. And just breathe. Stabilize your mind, your emotions around it. Notice how it is an energy that doesn't stay still. The mind, having thoughts affects it. The five senses affect it. Your feelings in your body, maybe there's an ache that distracts you. Hearing, augmenting your thoughts, shifting your feelings. Notice how everything is in flux. Wisely noticing this and seeking that inner stability that is our goal. Start to corral the mind by really feeling your breath and focusing only on your breath. Feel the expansion and contraction of your body as you breathe. Feel the sensations in your nose and your throat. And as you do this, to settle the limbic brain more and more, relax your body. Release your eyes, your cheeks, your jaw. The vagal nerve, the trigeminal nerve that roots right into your limbic brain, is going to react in your limbic brain immediately if you relax the facial muscles of your face. What is the expression of your emotions? Let your shoulders hang loose, soften. You can let a simple smile touch just the edge of your eyes while letting your jaw loosen. Stay with yourself and observe. Initiate samadhi. Feel your breath, feel your body flow with it while being unmoved by it. Resting in the present moment. Being a friend of your breath. Just breathing. Our instruction is to keep this going as long as possible, and even after our meditation ends, to walk in the world in tranquility, in stability, unmoved, but aware of what is taking place as best we can. A continual and deep letting go is necessary every time we become aware of what is moving, what has arisen, a re-releasing. So keep this going. I will leave you here. I will leave you with words from the Bhagavad Gita and say the symbolic image that you want your mind to take the shape of is like the energy of a candle flame in a place without wind, burning but looking solid and steady. May you always be at ease.